I see it as a sort of traditional work of crime fiction, but in what I guess is a sort of a science fiction context or a science fiction background. So although it tracks over the course of the trilogy, each of the three books is a different kind of crime novel. You know, the first one is a pretty traditional police procedural. The second one feels more like a private investigator kind of book. And the third one is, well, whatever the third one is. So they're all, I always imagined these as crime stories with the sort of sci-fi elements being just a way of making the crime stories more interesting. So it was never an attempt to sort of consciously mash up crime and sci-fi. It was more an attempt to tell a crime story in a more, in a sort of unique way, in a new way. It seemed to me that this world was going to be very dark and very sort of, you know, obviously kind of grim, with a lot of thought about death and about chaos and grief. And it felt to me it would be interesting, I think, if my hero was against that grain rather than with it. So in other words, he is fun and he is exciting for us to follow, because rather than being of a piece with that dark world around him, he is refusing to give into it. You know, his whole strategy for dealing with this is to just kind of block it out and to continue to be what he is, you know, which is someone who really believes in justice and I guess law enforcement and taking care of people. So it was just, I think it makes for a more textured book, a more rich kind of story, that Henry's not just another tough guy in a dark world. He is kind of a sweetheart and he's kind of a nice guy. And that makes him a little bit, it just makes everything more interesting, I think. I mean, I think, well, first of all, there have always been disaster stories. I think people have always been really curious about the end of things, you know, going back to, you know, the story of Noah and the Ark and, you know, the book of Revelation. And, you know, in every tradition, there are stories about the end of time. I think why it's so popular now, I'm not quite so sure. I think it can be very commercial. I think it can be an easy sale, you know, because it's not complicated. It's a big story. There are big stakes. It's an opportunity for a lot of heroism and a lot of villainy. So you got just, there are big stories in there. And perhaps we live in something of an anxious time. Perhaps people are concerned about what is going on with our civilization, and you know, and you know, certainly climate change might be part of that. So I think there is, on the one hand, a kind of permanent feature of our culture, the kinds of stories we tell, has to do with the end. And on the other hand, I think there might be something going on now that is making people concerned about it. I like Megan Abbott. I had a book called The Fever this summer. It was really good. There's a woman named Lauren Beukes, B-E-U-K-E-S. Her new novel is called Broken Monsters. It's really cool and weird, and she's doing kind of like a horror and crime combo with that book. I read a book called Descent by this guy Tim Johnston. I think it's his first novel, but I'm not sure. But it's about a child abduction. It's really powerful. I think a lot of authors are, as I've been trying to do, looking for ways to I guess, to do different kinds of things with crime, with the crime or mystery structure. To sort of, like The Fever, this Megan Abbott book, it's about high school kids, and it's about sexuality, and it's about sort of group dynamics, and it's about violence, but it's within the structure of what's going on. You know, it's within the structure of we're investigating what's happening with this kid. So you're asking these kind of traditional mystery kind of questions, but there is something else going on, whatever it is. And that's what excites me. That's what I really like about the great crime writers or mystery writers, is that there's some kind of philosophical or literary or metaphysical question that is underneath, just under the surface of the story, you know?